Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Fabio Monreale. I'm a lecturer at the University of Auckland in New Zealand, and I co-authored this work with Maria Eriksson from Umeå University in Sweden. My library has just been obliterated. So this is just one of the thousands comments that were left by Spotify users in response to an update that was released by the company in June 2019. So this presentation is about the role played by software updates to influence user behavior. So starting from this case study, we'll just try to generalize with a little bit new knowledge in the area. Let me start setting the stage. Traditionally, software updates are actually considered tools for fixing bugs or improving some software functionalities or adding new features. However, we try to problematize this point in our paper, showing that software updates might also be used by software vendors as political tools to create new norms of use, new ways of using the apps, in order that privilege certain forms of behaviors and restrict others. And I'm going to discuss this idea by exploring the controversial software update I was talking about before. It was released by Spotify last year, 2019, and I show you how it created new norms of use to control user behavior and to reduce user agency. So it means to push users more and more to delegate song selection to Spotify. And in order to appreciate this, we have to have a look a little bit to what was the Spotify evolution, how it evolved throughout its brief history. So ontologically, so the biggest change happened around 2013, we can say. Some scholars called this a curatorial turn, in which the traditional search-based access to music was replaced, gradually, by a new lean-back approach. And basically, this means that users starting to delegate song selection to Spotify. Lean back, instead of deciding actively what songs I want to listen to, I would just ask Spotify, okay, just tell me what I want to listen to. And this change, really strong ontological change, was staged by a number of UI updates. There are more information in the book that is referenced there below, but basically these UI updates really gradually shifted from providing a search-based interface to providing a playlist and recommendation-based interface. Instead of me typing there the name of the artist that I want to listen to, I just say, okay, just play me the recommended for you or the workout playlist. And we need to appreciate that this transformation really placed more control in the hands of Spotify and other streaming companies that followed similar model over the listening habits of their users. In this context, last year, June 13, 2019, Spotify released quite a massive update, but officially the only motivation was to fix performance issues. That was the official statement. So it suggests that the update would not really directly affect user interaction, possibly. And also they released this blog post the same day in which they say that the update was a sleeker, cleaner, smarter, for what it means, interface that allowed you to get you to the content that you want faster. However, in the days that followed the update, thousands of Spotify users were absolutely outraged by the new UI. So even if you skim through this quite quickly, you can see that the update was not just a matter of fixing performance issues, not even just sleeker or whatever that was smarter. So I have a few comments here. For instance, the one in the top left, this user says it creates a mind-boggling number of issues and fixing absolutely nothing that was actually an issue. Or nothing was added, only useful features were removed. So you can go on and read the other ones on your own. But so what is puzzling here is why did Spotify did not? Why didn't they list what the modified features were and actually just say, fix performance issues? So here we come. First thing, we analyze the characteristics of the update, what has been added, modified, or updated with the new version. But also we analyzed, that's kind of the main part of the study, the second point here, how these changes produced new norms of use that affected user listening behavior. So the first part was necessary because Spotify did not list itself, whatever, the characteristic of the update, so we had to do it ourselves. But then we analyzed how these affected the listening behaviors. So to begin with, we measured the general temperature, how the users received the update. So what we did, we scraped the ratings of the different version of Spotify for the whole month of June 2019, for the Apple Store and Google Play Store. And you see around the 13th of June, that is where the kind of a valley is exactly the day of the update. We also checked the number of ratings, so how many people bothered going on the App Store to rate the app. Well, that increased, so many people want to have a saying. And we also ran some numerical descriptive statistics to show that, yes, the average rating decreased and the volume rating increased. So these graphs and numbers actually confirm that the update was not really well received, but they don't really tell much about why, about the reasons. That's why we have the second part, qualitative analysis. Data, we collected data from unsolicited comments that were left by Spotify users online, on the official Spotify forum, on Twitter, and on Reddit. And then we analyzed these more than 3,000 comments that were posted in 2 weeks that followed the update. Procedure, first thing, again, about identifying what features is being removed or modified. For every comment on feature removal, modification, we systematically compare the app to a previous version, and we cross-checked whether the feature that was mentioned was indeed present in the previous version and was indeed removed or modified in the new one. Second thing, we looked into Spotify's reaction to the backlash. That's because in the past, companies have actually reverted back to the previous version of an app once the user showed some dissatisfaction. We have notable examples for in our community that discuss Tumblr and Snapchat. They rolled back. Third thing, main point, we investigated how these modified features that finally we know had an impact on the user's listening behaviors. So what new norms of use were created? Let's get started. Remove the modified features. So the most obvious one, can you see that alphabetic bar over there that allows you to quickly scroll through your library? Gone. So it was removed by the update. And then there are other 7 modified features. For instance, the recently played songs. You used to be able to just tap on a recently played song and just play it. Now when you tap on the recently played list on a song, it takes you to an album where the song is contained, or the playlist where the song is contained rather than the actual song. Why? Not clear at this point. There are other ones that I'm not really going to go through all of them. The details, of course, are in the paper, as you might have guessed. But for instance, this is quite important. So on the artist page, before, when you tapped on an artist name, it used to take you to the songs and albums that you had saved of that specific artist. So after the update, when you tap on an artist name, it takes you to the page where it contains all the songs ever created by the artist. So this curational work made by every user in which they selected what songs they like of each artist is gone. Then, for instance, Spotify users were previously able to download albums and then selectively remove songs from these albums, the ones they didn't like, for instance, like bonus tracks. Functionality was removed. Other things, the download of individual songs was removed. You can't download any more individual songs. So, again, none of these are really a disaster taking on its own, possibly. Well, some users would disagree with that statement, but that is why. So, these functionalities did also not bother anybody. Or I can think of a user asking Spotify, sorry, can you please remove the possibility to download one individual song? It's really annoying me. It's unlikely. So we wanted to see what was Spotify answer. What's the reaction? Did they take accountability for the update or accepted the user complaints and maybe offered to address them? Let's see. So this is a typical exchange between a user and an employee and a Spotify employer. What happened to the alphabet scrolling and recently play? Fix please, I hate this. Sorry to hear you're not enjoying the new look. Like if it was a matter of visual redesign. The changes make it easier. And of course you say it doesn't make it easier. And then Spotify answers were pretty much standardized, and they keep insisting it's easier to navigate now. It gives you a better listening experience, and you can access your content, your favorite, faster. Then, of course, people kept complaining. How is getting rid of an alphabetized list getting an improvement? Or it's not easier or faster, it just takes more steps to access to the music. Important, Spotify then released a blog post in which they suggested the user to become accustomed to the new ways in which the library was organized. So they did not reintroduce the features, but instead, they asked users to realign their listening behaviors with the new ways in which they intended the app to be used. Important point is that these modified functionalities introduce new affordances that affected how the app can and cannot be used. So even if it's small changes, big changes in the affordances, we analyze them, the affordances, to understand the new norms of use that were produced by the update. And I'm going to list them quite quickly. First norm of use we call volatile libraries. So the update had the effect of making the libraries volatile. Large part of users' library were suddenly deleted, and also ironically, actually, the update also populated the libraries with some unwanted tracks, the ones that users selectively removed. And also, the ability to curate and maintain libraries was compromised, and both these comments that I put here explains this very well. Despite having paid for the service for years, and despite the time they invested in curating their libraries, they are saying the virtual musical collection was witfully destroyed. That's what the second comment says, with basically no explanation, and they didn't have any saying about this. This update was unnecessary and removed functionality that was vital to how I use the service. I've paid, and now these saved artists are gone for no apparent reason. Second norm of use that we identified is about impaired navigation. So the update introduced several changes that made it harder also to navigate their libraries, not just to curate them. And the scroll bar is just one of the examples, but again, go to the paper and there are a lot of other examples there. Third, norms of use. So volatile libraries, we say impaired navigation, and also disqualified listening behaviors. So many users really felt that the way in which they used to listen to the music was no longer supported. Basically, the new version made obsolete some ways to interact with a personal connection. I'm reading the first comment. I had to fiddle with an unintuitive UI that actively tried to keep me from listening to the music in the way that I wanted. And also the last comment actually is from a user that is happy about the new UI, but is saying, I already use Spotify the way they are making everyone conform to. So we really try to understand the rationale for this. So what is this all about? Why did they try to reduce the possibility to curate libraries, to navigate them, and blah, blah, blah. We find inspiration from literature in media studies and digital humanities to understand this update. And then we specifically base our discussion on two lenses. The first one being protocological power. So the new norms of use introduced with the update extended Spotify's effort to control users' listening behaviors and really dissuaded users from maintaining their own library. And we understand this as an expression of protocological power. There is an effort to discreetly steer, adjust, and withdraw users' access to tools and resources via software update. And this effort is very well described by this user comment. I now feel I can choose what I want to listen to, and Spotify has the right to choose it for me. Second concept is the last point of the discussion, is about withdrawing ownership. So again, trying to find the rationale here. The update created new affordances that actually discourage the use of Spotify as an iPod, where music is locally stored and is always present. Instead, it promoted streaming, but at the same time, it reduced the ability to download musical content. And again, a comment of a user clarifies this concept. Spotify has always hated the fact that it had to give users a library in the first place. They don't want you to listen to the music, blah, blah, blah. They want you to herd you into new music so they can access the Discovery service. And this thing, Spotify researchers have been quite clear about this at Last Sky. They said music streaming has obviated the need for storage at all. We showed also that software updates can also significantly disrupt user abilities to keep and maintain musical archives. And the sudden and disruptive introduction of updates is a threat, that's what we argued, to the virtual ownership. The fact that the update compromised the library access and curation is particularly relevant for perception of ownership, which is linked to the amount of creative effort is put into curating libraries and organizing music consumption. So the update basically withdrew the user's sense of ownership and showed users how vulnerable the music collection are. A final reflection point, our study really challenges the idea that technological innovation is inherently good, and indeed, the user protest that followed Spotify update showed how technology for music consumption could be otherwise, and that's where also we invite future works. Thanks.